If there's one thing I've come to know through the journey I've been on, in the research I've done, and by speaking with so many incredible experts and fellow moms, it's that this up and down dance of life is always interesting, filled with challenges, heartbreak, joy, love, wins, and losses. Our everyday is always changing, and our reality is truly based on how we perceive it to be. And you know what? That's the good news, and it's also the bad news. For this episode, I am so happy to be sharing an interview that I did with the beautiful, brilliant, and immensely compassionate Dr. Laura Froyen on her podcast, The Balanced Parent. Now, you may remember Dr. Laura's interview on The Juggle is Real that aired this past summer on how to do the inner work and reparent yourself. If you haven't heard it, definitely go back and listen. It's episode 23, and it's an incredible discussion, as is the one that we had for her podcast, which takes a look at overcoming burnout and guilt. I find it especially interesting that among so many important topics and themes that I explore on this podcast and in interviews, blog posts, broadcasts, burnout and guilt are still most prevalent. This tells me that we need to continue having these conversations and sharing our experiences, as you'll soon hear in the interview. And I say that burnout and guilt are often the most dominant topics, not to further make you feel guilty or shame you, or I don't want anyone to feel worse. I say it because as a collective, we can take the common ground and build from it. In our community, we can shine a light on our current reality and then find ways to share and overcome hardship in methods that can be supportive, with forgiveness, with grace, and with ease. So if nothing else, my conversation with Laura shows that while we may sometimes know better, the awareness piece is just the first step. And while sometimes the most important one, this process of overcoming burnout and guilt doesn't end with the awareness of it. Even with a PhD in human development and family studies with a specialization in couple and family therapy, Laura herself admits to struggling with health issues and burnout, which has been a really difficult journey for her recently. And if you've been here a little while, you know that burnout is part of my personal experience as well. So in our discussion, we go over some tools for being aware of where our guilt is stemming from, how we can serve ourselves with compassion, and how to remove guilt through forgiveness and creating new truths. So I really felt called to share this interview here as well as on Laura's podcast to try to reach and support as many people as we can. If you feel called to, please share this with someone who you think could feel seen, supported, and gain from this episode. And if this conversation resonates with you and you think you could use a little extra help, please head to the podcast notes for this episode and add yourself to the wait list to be the first to know about my next workshop called You First, Making the Shift to Better Balance 2.0. Along with research-backed findings and advice, we dive deep to create change and make shifts to your mindset, body, and soul. It is a beautiful and transformative experience that I only offer a couple of times a year. So please, if you feel called to, add your name to the list so that we can send you all the details and you can decide if it is for you. So without further ado, I give you this podcast episode from The Balanced Parent. I love you and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Juggle is Real podcast. I'm your host, Andryanna. A few years ago, burnout nearly cost me that happy, fulfilled life that I'd always dreamed of. Every day left me feeling overwhelmed with stress at work, at home, and just with life in general. I felt like I was constantly running and couldn't catch my breath. So I embarked on a journey of finding better balance, of learning how to prioritize my own needs, of shifting my mindset to live with more ease and balance, of learning how to do more without the pressure of doing it all. And I discovered that letting go of the need for a perfect life opened up opportunities to bring in more joy. So I am sharing my experience and my learnings with you so that you don't have to struggle. I want to show by example how liberating and empowering it can be to silence expectations, to learn how to live through the chaos of work and family with grace, joy, and ease. So what do you think? Are you with me? Let's get started.
Hello, everybody. On this week's episode of the Balanced Parent Podcast, I'm going to be sitting down with a guest and we're going to be talking about how to figure out where our guilt as parents, especially as moms, comes from and how to release it for once and for all. So I'm so excited to have my guest on to talk about this topic with us. Andryanna, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. Will you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, Laura, I'm so thrilled to be here, and it's so nice to see your face again. You were recently on my podcast not too long ago, and so I'm so happy that we're sitting down and chatting on The Balanced Parent, because it is a podcast that I have found so much support and value in, and something that I come back to often. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I myself am a podcaster as well. My podcast is called The Juggle is Real.
It's so good. You have to go listen to it.
Thank you. Thank you. And basically, I started it because I am a mom. I have 3 boys, and I understand the struggles that we go through with motherhood, with our careers, and just trying to juggle it all. A few years ago, I experienced burnout. I was really trying to be that perfect mom, perfect wife and colleague and manager and all of these things. And that ultimately led to not measuring up and feeling bad and being more stressed and more overwhelmed than was needed. And so through that experience, I really had to just go inwards. And it took me on a journey that led to learning how to add better balance in my life. And so I think that this is not unique to just me. I know that I'm certainly not the only one who has gone through this. And it's a process that I'm continually learning and continually, just trying to manage and to sort through and to figure out on a day-by-day basis. And so it's, how can I love myself first, which can sometimes be very difficult for moms especially. How can I prioritize myself? And from there, doing these things that really spark joy and light me up and better care for myself, so that I am able to be the mom that I want to be to my children, be the wife that I want to be to my spouse, and be more efficient and more productive in the work that I'm doing. And this is just the journey that it has been taking me on. So I share often through television interviews, with the podcast, on social media, and I also run workshops, both personal and corporate workshops, just to try to normalize this juggle that we're going through, and to just let everyone know that it's okay. You can do things for yourself, and no guilt is needed.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about guilt. I really resonated when you were talking about how you had kind of all these roles. You were wearing so many different hats and feeling like you weren't meeting expectations in any of them. I felt that before, where I felt like I had so many roles, so many hats that I was wearing as a therapist, as a professor. So I was a professor for a while. I had lots of different hats as a mom, a wife, trying to care for myself. I had been in a car accident, so caring for my body, and I was just failing at everything. So I definitely resonated with that. And I think lots of us have been in that place where we're wearing, just even within the role of mom, there's so many hats to wear. There's,
Yes.
Emotional regulation source, there's nurse, there's chef, there's just so many roles that we wear.
And carpooler.
Yes,
we were just
chauffeur.
Chatting about that.
Yes. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then, so where does the guilt come from that we feel? Because I think a lot of us feel that. We feel like we're failing, and this guilt bubbles up, and it's hard to know where it comes from.
It is something that's really prevalent, and I'm not sure if it was, passed down from, generation to generation. I think a lot of times when we look around us, it's really easy to see that everyone else has got it figured out. Everyone else is doing it perfectly. And we look to all these external circumstances, right? Whether it be advertisements or social media, or just, seeing that mom at pickup who looks like, she's so polished and put together. And oftentimes we are holding ourselves to such on a pedestal, really, like we
A
have this
really high standard.
ideal. Yeah, exactly. So when we have an ideal of what we think motherhood or parenting should look like, it's impossible to measure up to what's perfect, right? And so whenever we're trying to do that, we're inevitably going to fall short of being perfect, because that's just not realistic. No one is ever going to be able to measure up to those types of standards. So I think a lot of it has, been passed down to us, but also I think when we're looking externally, those judgments can creep up. And so I think oftentimes we just have to take a look inwards and see what is that cause that's creating the effect of guilt.
Yeah, it sounds like you are saying that we need to have this kind of really like firmly in place filter or lens that we kind of, as information comes in from the outside world, pressures from our own upbringing, ideas from culture and social media, that we have to kind of filter through that and really be aware of, okay, how is that making me feel? Is this actually something that I believe in? Is this something that I want to take on as kind of my role, instead of just kind of accepting this is what it's supposed to be and I'm not measuring up, right?
Exactly. And I think you said, the most important part is just gaining that awareness, like if, for some reason you feel triggered by something, like, so just pausing, and that is the most beautiful part, is recognizing and being aware of it and saying, okay, so is this true? Like, is this something that's true? Oftentimes we look like, oh, well, she looks like she's got it put together. This looks like the ideal picture of motherhood. Why can't I do this? Well, is it true what you're trying to look to? Is it a real actual fact, or is it just something that we're assuming? Is it an assumption on our part, or is it how you want to be feeling? Is this a situation that you want? Sometimes we look to these external areas, but is that actually what we want in our lives, or is it just something that we're seeing and that we're not measuring up to, and so we're holding ourselves to this impossible standard? So I think the awareness is really the first step, and it's so important. And it's when we can understand why we're feeling this way, then we can really just be honest with ourselves and start this process of forgiving ourselves and letting go of whatever this is. Oftentimes it starts with our judgments. And I kind of giggle when I say it, because when we think to what sometimes is bothering us or what is triggering us, it's oftentimes things that we are judging ourselves for. It's inwards, right? When we're judging others, or if we're looking to those outside areas, it's something that we are perhaps feeling not okay with about ourselves. And so just unearthing that and just putting that out there, I think is really, really important. And just being able to say, okay, you know what? I forgive myself. I forgive myself for judging myself as, not being that perfect mom, or for, getting angry when my kids didn't do X, Y, or Z, or when this occurred. I'm forgiving of myself, and that allows us to let go and release it. And I honestly I write it down, because it's one thing to think it, and it's so great to be able to pause and do this at any point in the day. But like, I personally like to see that visual representation, and I write it down. I forgive myself for judging myself as, and then I just, let whatever it is, let it go. And then from there, I like to create a new truth around it. And I like to just, make a statement, an affirmation, and create a truth of how I really do want to feel. So I'm forgiving myself for however, that guilt is creeping up. And then my new truth is that I am an amazing mom. I am, a supportive spouse. I am whatever those things are. I am calm. I am patient. I am understanding. And then we can release those guilts, those judgments, and then we can just focus on the new truths, and we can reiterate the truths to ourselves and repeat it to ourselves. And perhaps when we do feel triggered, we can just recall and remember what that feeling is that we want. And that repetition is really helpful.
Yeah.
And soon enough, it's like, and this is something that you can probably speak to as well from your professional background, is like, when we can release those doubts, those guilt, that judgment, and we can just focus on what it is that we want to feel, how we want to show up, who we want to be, we can forget about the old and really just allow that truth to become our reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're saying. It's, our brains love to be efficient, right? So our brains love to think in habitual patterns because then they can automate it and not have to put forth a lot of effort, right? And so we have these super highways in our brain, and our brain also uses judgment to make decisions about our world. And our poor, wonderful, well-intentioned brain isn't built for this modern world with all of this information coming in, and it's just doing its best to help us. And we have these patterns that aren't helpful, these patterns of the ways of thinking and judging, likely handed to us from our own upbringing, from culture, that need shifting. And I think one of the pieces that I wanted to kind of just circle back to and dig in on a little bit, if that's okay with you, is recognizing when we're engaging in judgment, because I think that that's so hard. I think again, that awareness piece of noticing, okay, so I'm bringing, information is coming in, I'm filtering in some information or some feedback from the system that I'm in, and then I make some kind of judgment about it. And just even recognizing that, and that judgments can be positive too. So that's a good mom is just as judgmental as that's a bad mom. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So do you have any tips for us on kind of how to practice, exercise that muscle of noticing judgment, noticing when we're judging ourselves, judging others, because we spend a lot of time in judgment, right?
We do. We really do. And for myself, I found that it was something that I was really open to offering up. And it was something that I used as almost like a defense mechanism, but also a way to gain connection. So an example I'll share is like a group chat that I have with my girlfriends. And it was a place for me to complain, to release those judgments, really. But I was doing it in a way that was sort of trying to use humor, perhaps, and oh, guess I'm a hot mess, and
guess I'm the worst mom ever.
Yeah.
Yes,
oh,
yeah.
Forgot my kid's lunch today, bad mom move, or all of these things. And so I would kind of be in this paradigm of poking fun at it, and I think we see that a lot.
Minimizing the pain that is under it.
Yeah. And so and in some cases it was sort of like that validation aspect, or when we see things and you see something on social media and it's the mom who's like, you're just pouring a glass of wine at the same time she's pouring a cup of coffee, and she's got her dry shampoo out, and she's wearing a jogging suit, and there is nothing wrong with any of these things, but it's perpetuating this mentality of this is what motherhood looks like. And of course, there's times when you're going for that cup of coffee. There's times when the dry shampoo is your go-to. But I think when we're just focusing on that, then that's kind of where the judgment can grow. And that is what we focus on will grow, right? And so if that's all we're looking at is this side of motherhood, this side of parenting, this side of how we are emoting, how we are communicating is through this sort of self-effacing, poke fun at ourselves. We're all hot messes, and, there's nothing we can do about it, versus recognizing, how you're feeling in those moments. And instead of trying to minimize it, trying to make fun of yourself, or trying to complain about it, just letting yourself know and give yourself that moment to be like, you know what, it's okay. It's okay that I chose to sleep in this morning and I didn't have time to wash my hair. And so I am using the dry shampoo, and that's okay. I am an amazing mom, regardless of how clean my hair is, right?
Yes.
Or, what my external appearance is, or whether I choose to wear, tight fitting jeans, or whether I'm going for the jogging pants. It's okay. I forgive myself for any of this judgment that's creeping up. And what I want to focus on is how I want to feel, how, even whether I'm choosing, option A or option B, I'm okay with that decision either way. It doesn't make me a hot mess. It doesn't make me a good mom or a bad mom. I am, regardless of what happens, I am, patient and calm and loving. I'm supportive and understanding, and, just focusing on what those new truths are, how you want to be. And when we focus on that side of it, that's what we're going to see reflected back to us. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of are, we're going to minimize the negative and we're going to focus on those positives. Like, oh, you know what? I did pack those lunches today, and you know what? Maybe I forgot one little treat, but you know what? It's okay, because then it opened up a new conversation, and really just measuring those wins that you had in a day, mm-hmm. instead of just focusing on, the things that maybe didn't go as you expected them to.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you had a really important message in there for us as a community of moms too, like a community of parents. When you were talking about your group chat, I just wonder how powerful it would be for all of us who are listening to this right now, listening to this conversation, to just take a moment, because we all have those group chats. Hopefully, if we don't, we need them. We all have the people that we talk to about these things. And I just wonder what it would be like to take to heart what you're saying. And instead of coming from that place of kind of poking fun at it, we acknowledged, without humor, I'm having a hard day today. I made some mistakes that I don't feel good about. We're honest and vulnerable with each other, because we all want to feel seen and heard, right? There's a reason why those videos on Instagram and TikTok are so relatable, right? We all want to not feel so alone in the messy middle of parenting, right?
Absolutely.
And there's room for that. There's room for, we need lightness at times, but then we also need honesty and vulnerability and a moment to just say, we don't have to be alone in this. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I know, I agree with you. And I think community in motherhood is so important. So important. And I think that when we can maybe be the ones to step up and have those open conversations, then it really just does help others, feel comfortable to be able to do the same thing. And it was a bit of a struggle for me at first too. Like, I will say that I really had to pause and not engage myself, when friends or people were having those conversations. So for me, my step was not to engage in it, because I for myself would always have to pile on to it. Like, oh yeah, and guess what else happened? And then this, and, and really just kind of get into a negative spiral. And it's okay. And I mean, I'm not saying that humor is bad, because I turn to comedy all the time. Yeah. And I know that's not what you're suggesting either. I'm just saying that when we're trying to bury our feelings under the guise of these stereotypes, I think that we're just feeding into it even more.
It doesn't serve us.
Yeah. And it's really causing us to feel that mom guilt creep up again, or it's really just burying those feelings deep down under the guise of humor, or, even just not talking about it at all, instead of just being open and honest, whether we're doing that with a friend, with a loved one, perhaps a professional, or whether we're just doing that with ourselves, with a journal, with, our thoughts, or just, instead of taking to social media, maybe it is like just clearing our head, or doing like a 10-minute guided meditation, or some stretching, or getting some fresh air, doing things that are really going to serve us. And instead of perpetuating the stereotype, or letting it snowball, we are releasing it, and we're trying to do things that serve us and are going to really help us be the person who we're trying to be. Not the perfect person, but that feeling of, I am enough and I am worthy, and no matter what happens in my day, I know that this is who I am.
Yeah. And handling those hard times that come for all of us, right? Because the struggle bus stops at everybody's door from time to time, handling those in an emotionally healthy way. And it's so hard to do that when maybe we didn't learn that growing up. But what a beautiful gift to give to your family, to your children that you're raising, to see them, to have them see a parent modeling that, you know, sitting in a place of that didn't go well, you know, repairing, apologizing, reconnecting with them and with yourself, offering yourself forgiveness and grace and compassion. That's a beautiful thing to model for our children.
Yes, yes. And you know what? It was just a few weeks ago. I really had to dig deep and to remember what we're discussing right now. If I could just share a quick
Please,
story.
we love stories.
So I have three boys, ages 8, 6, and 20 months. And so it's a loud household. It's a busy household. Mornings are full time, I will say. My husband leaves for work very early in the morning, so it's just me with my boys to get everyone, packed up and dressed and ready for school and ready for the day. And I like to wake up early. I choose to wake up early so that I can have a few moments of calm and quiet. And throughout that busy morning rush, I accidentally gave my toddler the medication that my 8-year-old receives. So my 8-year-old has ADHD, and so we have been experimenting with different types of treatments. And currently, he does take medication to help support him at school with his focus and with his hyperactivity. And he doesn't like to take the pill, and so we put it oftentimes like in a candy or in yogurt, or we have all sorts of different ways of doing this. And I somehow was very busy, and I accidentally gave it to my toddler and didn't realize until he'd already completely ate the little candy that had the medication in it. And so, I mean, if you're talking about a mom guilt moment, I feel like this was for me, like it just once that realization hit, I was like, just had that feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I was like, how did I do this? Like, how could I have done this? And so there was a moment of, oh snap, like it, like, what is going on? And I had a quick call to my husband and explained what happened. And then he was going to call our family doctor. And in that moment, I was just like, okay, I can either fall apart and cry and feel bad and feel awful. And, that energy is going to radiate and everyone in the house is going to feel that. Or I can realize that what has happened and work to being there for my little guy who is going to be having a tricky time now that we know that he's taken this medication. And my other kids who still have to get to school, who still have to, finish with their breakfast and do all of these things. And so I made the decision to just be, the calm, supportive, understanding, and efficient mom that I truly, want to serve as. And you know what? Laura, I'm not going to lie. Like, it was a tough day. Like, he thankfully didn't have to have any medical intervention. He didn't have to go to the hospital or see the doctor, but he wasn't a happy camper, and he had a tough day. And so I was able to support him through that. But I also did have to take moments for myself. I did have to lean on some support. I did have to call on, my husband to come home early, because I needed a few minutes just to like decompress, to take those feelings, put them out on paper. I actually did like a 15-minute yoga. And then I was just like, okay, I was able to come back to myself and just be like, okay, these things happen, and forgive myself for the mistake that I had made, because things happen. And thankfully, the next day he was right back to his normal, cute, adorable, inquisitive, very curious and into everything little self. But I think we all have these times where we wish something didn't happen. And instead of dwelling on the issue or the mistake, when we can try to focus on the solution, or, how we can support ourselves and support those around us, I think it's just one of those ways that we can really get past those feelings of guilt and judgment.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for so vulnerably sharing that story with us. I really appreciate that. We need to hear each other, be honest. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty. Sometimes I feel like I can kind of almost like channel my listeners And I know if I were listening to this, I would be wondering about, in that moment where you made that decision, I could go this way or this way, how I think that lots of us are, as parents, are chasing that present moment pause, that space between stimulus and response to get that choice. And I'm kind of curious. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I know we're all hungry for that space, for that pause. And I'm kind of curious if you have anything to offer around how you were able to get that in that moment.
It's such a good question. And I'm not saying I do it perfectly every time. I have moments where I am, reacting, just bedtime routine alone can get me very aggravated at times and very frustrated. But I think it is in those simple everyday things. And it is the repetition. This was not my first time in trying to better understand how I was reacting to situations. I have been trying to be more aware of my response and why I am reacting versus responding or choosing one way or over another way. And so it's like this ongoing journey, but I do like to try to surround myself with messaging, with reading, with podcasts and community that is supportive of the direction of creating truths for yourselves, living the truths that you want to have, and not focusing on the negatives. And so I myself have a coach and a mentor. So I listen to coaching calls at 6 a.m. every morning. That has been very pivotal in my life. I like to do some readings. A really great book that was extremely life-changing for me is called The Gap and the Gain by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And I think it's written more from the perspective of entrepreneurship and, success, looking at success. But I really felt it through my experiences with parenting and in juggling both my career and, my role as a mom. And it really focuses on looking towards the gains and looking to the wins and focusing on that instead of where you're not measuring up or where you still have room to grow or where you're striving for goals, which are really great and super helpful. But if you're only measuring what you haven't done versus all the things that you have done, then I think that's where a lot of us can struggle. And so it's a practice. It's something that I choose to do every day. I choose to write out who I want to be. I choose to look to modes of self-care that I know are really filling me up, even in very small and, sometimes just moments. I'm not saying that I dedicate hours of my day to self-care, but literally the 15 minutes in the morning or, taking a pause halfway through my day and doing a little bit of stretching or making an effort to get outside and get some fresh air instead of just, barreling into my to-do list and my pile of work. I think the mindfulness aspect allows us to know that we can have these pauses and to know that we can still manage everything that we have to do and get to that to-do list. And things are going to, get done, even if we're able to take those pauses. And so when that oopsie happened, I had to feel it in the moment. I had to have that feeling of oh no, but I was able then to just, kind of flip the switch a little bit and say, okay, now I have to decide how I want to look at this situation, and it was a very good learning for me. It was a lesson, that I can now look back to and I can share. And, thankfully my son was okay in that situation, but, there could be instances where we make mistakes and, there are more serious consequences. And so I think knowing that everything that we do, whether it's forgetting the treat in our kids' lunches or doing something the wrong way or forgetting something, I remember it was my son's birthday and all he wanted was a Happy Meal. And it was lunchtime at their school. And my husband called me and he said, oh, how did Ashton like his Happy Meal? And I was like, no, oh my goodness. I literally ran out the door in my slippers and drove to to McDonald's to get that Happy Meal, and it was a few minutes late. But we have these situations. And so I think when we, instead of dwelling on them, when we can forgive ourselves because it happens, we can really move past it a lot faster. And then we can show up for those who are really counting on us to show up for them, especially in motherhood. We're not just responsible to these people, we're responsible for them, for making sure that they are loved, for making sure that they feel safe, for making sure that they have that security, and they know that when they make mistakes, it's not the end of the world either. Right. Yeah. So I had to, just explain to my older two, like, oh, mommy gave Zach like Ben's medication, and it's okay. He's going to be okay. But now we just have to, he's going to have a tricky day. And so we just have to be really understanding and give him extra love today, And so I think when we can show ourselves that compassion and look through the lens of compassion, then we're not looking externally as much. We're not noticing, oh, she looks so put together. Or, oh no, as if she didn't do X, Y, or Z, when we're looking to other parenting styles. The less I judge myself, the less I'm judging others. Yeah. And it's such a better place to be. And then our kids, like you mentioned, when we're modeling that, when they make mistakes, hopefully they can come to a place where they're taking the learnings from it and are more understanding of themselves, instead of getting really down and being really hard on themselves, which sometimes I've seen, and some situations my kids can feel really down. And so just knowing that we're allowed to be understanding of ourselves, I think is so special.
I think so too. And I think, sometimes the message of kind of focusing on the positives can lean into kind of that like toxic positivity place of it. And I really love that you are being so clear on the importance of self-compassion and self-forgiveness, that we're not washing over or ignoring anything, that we're recognizing it, acknowledging it, sitting with ourselves in it, and being kind to ourselves in the midst of it, which is, I think, not always the message that we get out in the world. We get the message, oh, just ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, like don't think about it. And that's not what you're saying at all. I really appreciate that a lot, because I think we need to know that it's okay to have hard times. It's okay to have moments of pain. We're human beings. We have access to the full range of human emotion and expression. And when we limit one end, we limit the other too. And so it's not about limiting anything or ignoring anything. It's about feeling it, being kind, and then moving forward with conscious choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. I love how you put that together too. That's great. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you bringing that message to us and to the world. I feel very fortunate that we were able to have this conversation today. I love the last thing you said, when I focus less on, when I'm judging myself less, I find that I judge others less too. And I think, gosh, we all need that magic and medicine in the world. The magic of less judgment. I think that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So it all starts with us, but we have to feel those feelings. We have to sit with them, and then we can choose to move past them and to continue to just, lead with our open hearts and have the conversations that need to be had, whether it's, understanding it with ourselves, having the moments with ourselves, and then, going to our friends, going to a spouse, a loved one, someone whom we trust. I think the more we have these conversations, the more, compassionate we're all going to be to one another. And I think that's really great.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Well, so I really needed this conversation this morning. I had a hard morning with my kids, and out of respect for their privacy, I'm not going to share what happened, but I was feeling kind of guilty when I sat down with you this morning for our conversation, and I feel a lot better coming out of it. So thank you personally too.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I know, I think we oscillate through these feelings, on an ongoing basis. And so, whenever we need to just remember, I think coming back to that forgiveness, going through that quick statement, whether we're writing it down or whether we're just saying it in our heads, while we're driving, I forgive myself for judging myself as, and whatever it is, for my new truth is, and being able to be conscious of how we do want to feel in those moments.
Yeah.
You know, like it's going to be okay, and to know that we will move past it, and having that just ability to have something to come back to. And I think, you know, when you asked earlier, like, what do we do in those moments, in that pause? How do we, instead of just going straight down that spiral, or, you know, taking that path that might not serve us as well, you know, maybe that's the statement that we can come back to, or just remember and recall whatever that truth is, that affirmation, and come back to it, you know, have it written out, or have it in a journal, listen to something. And on the podcast, I do have an episode that is dedicated to truths for busy working moms, you know, having some of these statements. So feel free to listen and borrow it, and come back to it anytime you need that extra, you know, support, and that layer of comfort to know that you truly are doing an amazing job, and you're worthy of feeling the good feelings that are associated with the roles that you carry.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind sending me the link to that episode? I can put it in the show notes for this episode.
I'd love to share. Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
You know, this morning, I think it's just important to remember that this works for when we're judging our kids too. So this morning, my struggle came, it would be easy to blame it on my kids, but really it came from my interpretation of the behavior that was happening, you know, and all the thoughts and judgments about what they were doing, what it meant about them, and what it meant about me as a mom, you know? And so I, like, in the moment, I was able to kind of challenge the thoughts I was having. You know, one part of my brain's thinking, she's so this, or she's being this way. And me saying, no, it's actually this, you know, and being able to really kind of have that internal dialogue with yourself around what the truth is, the truth about your kids, the truth about you, I think is really an important message. And it's not always us that we're judging. Sometimes we judge our kids too, you know, or our partners. And
absolutely.
Yeah. I think
I struggle with that a lot too. And I think a lot of times it's, you know, at home it's one thing, but sometimes when we're out, I can allow what I feel that people's expectations are somehow shift the way that I'm showing up. And so again, it's just being aware and being conscious of it, and saying, like, you know what, if this is what's happening, whether someone sees it or not, it's going to be okay, you know, and these things happen. And sometimes there's nothing that we can do in that moment, right? Except for be there to support our children, and have those conversations, you know, afterwards when things have cooled off. But yeah, coming from, you know, sometimes, you know, there are some difficult moments, you know, and and I think my understanding has grown so much since, you know, my oldest was young, when we would see different behaviors that, you know, I really wasn't used to seeing. Having places to turn to, like your podcast, where there are safe spaces to have these conversations and discussions, I think is so beautiful. And how you validate all of these different experiences that we're having. You know, we you know, some of us have neurodivergent children, some of us have children with you know, different challenges and difficulties, some of us have traumas and different, you know, generational issues that we are, you know, are unearthing ourselves. And so I really love how in the moment sometimes things don't go the way we want them to, but when we have this sort of tool belt that we know, like, okay, I'm not the only one. I know that I've, you know, we've moved past this before. I know I have, you know, these tools and these truths that I can come back to. I think it's just that layer of support that many of us really need.
Yeah. And it's coming home to the truth, like you've said, just coming home to the truth of who we are, the truth of what we're bringing to this world, the truth of it being a process of us constantly being in progress and growing and becoming, never done, never finished. You know, it's okay to be in progress, you know, to have a few steps forward and a few steps back, and to have times where, oh yes, here this is again, we're working on this again, you know, and having gratitude for the opportunity to be a species that grows and develops through the lifespan, right? So development doesn't stop in childhood, right? We're never done and finished.
Yeah. And, whatever's coming to us, and, we have lessons to learn and we have teachings that are coming to us, and measuring it that way, I think, just going back to what we've gained even in the hard times, and whether it's through parenting or other circumstances in our lives, we have the ability, like you were talking about, with this beautiful, magnificent human brain, we can choose to take those memories, and we can choose whether we want to have solely a negative lens on it, or whether there are some lessons that were learned, or whether there were some things, some sheds and beams of light that have made things better for us, or have taught us something, or have, brought new learnings to us in the stage of life that we're in. And so we have that ability to go back. And so just, poking fun at it, or, bottling it down, or, trying to forget about it won't serve us, whether it is something that happened in the past or just in that moment. We truly won't learn that lesson until we take a look at it and just, become aware, take the learnings, and forgive what we need to let go.
Yeah. And release. Yeah. Let it move through us, fully process it and release. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for this conversation. It was beautiful. I really appreciate it. I just want to make sure one last time that folks know where to find you, where they can listen to your teachings more.
Yes, the podcast is called The Juggle is Real, and you can find it wherever you're listening right now, whatever podcast player you choose. You can also find me on Instagram. I do share a lot there. My handle is Andryanna G. So that's ANDRYANNAG. And, through that profile, there's some links to website and some free resources and some actionable tools that you can use to help you move through these processes.
Oh, great. And I'll make sure everything is in the show notes. Andryanna, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and the gift that you're putting out into the world.
Oh, it's truly my pleasure, Laura. Thanks so much for having me here today to chat with you and have this conversation with your listeners.
I hope you got a lot from this interview with Dr. Laura Froyen. Her podcast, The Balanced Parent, is a beautiful place to land for many motherhood topics from incredible experts and with insights from Laura herself. And as you heard in the interview, I personally have gained so much from being a listener of her show. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would tap a quick rating, write a short and sweet review, and share it with one friend. And if you'd like more details on the next workshop that I'm holding to help you create space for yourself, lose the guilt, and put yourself first so that you can better be equipped to serve those around you, please head to the show notes for this episode in your podcast player and add your name to the list for all of the details. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you so much. Until the next time, take good care.